There are two Indiana Jones adventure attractions. Though they have various similarities, there are numerous differences that make them quite distinguishable from one another. There's a lot to cover in this one, so let's get to it. At Disneyland, the queue starts outside and we see numerous objects for theming, including a truck as well as a generator. It also provides the feeling that you are in a dense jungle. Numerous depictions of cobras can be found as they are on the stairway leading up to the temple, as well as on columns that are holding planters. At Tokyo, the queue also begins outdoor, but this time all of the theming is attached to the show building, which is not visible at Disneyland. The show building is made to resemble Mesoamerican architecture and even has a giant pyramid. At the base, you can find a feathered or plumed serpent. After entering the temple in India, you have a rather long walk ahead of you. The queue is made to look like a temple that is currently undergoing excavation, as you find bamboo scaffolding all over the place. All over the temple, mysterious text and writing can be found, which is actually just a simple substitution cipher. As you go through the line, you find that various traps have been set and countered. There are two interactive elements in this line. One is by pulling on a piece of bamboo that is supporting the ceiling trap. By disturbing the bamboo, it gives way and starts to bend, and even the ceiling descends a little. There's also a rope hanging over an open shaft. Pulling on it can trigger different dialogue. You can also find the same gag, and with some of the same dialogue, at Indiana Jones Stunt Spectacular at Disney World.
Hey, I got it.
At Tokyo, when you find yourself inside the pyramid, you find that there are skeletons everywhere, and it appears to be a sacrificial chamber. In the next chamber, there's a few different areas for light to shine above onto a single mirror, and when it does, it reveals part of a mural on the wall. Different parts of the mural will be illuminated depending on where the light is coming from at the time. At Disneyland, there's a black and white safety video that is featuring John Rhys Davies as Sala. However, it is not his voice. In it, slides are shown instead of an actual video. We also get some context into the ride's story through Eye on the Globe newsreels. At Tokyo, the safety video is now a full motion instead of just slides, and it's being presented by Paco instead of Sala. There is no additional context given to the story here like at Disneyland. In the loading area, the attractions begin to show some parody. Though the layout is very similar due to the different locations, the architecture is quite unique from one another. The queue gates at Disneyland are bamboo, and they are divided by gas cans. At Tokyo, the queue gates are metal bars, and are divided by the contraption that seems to operate the metal gates. There's a rather beat up looking gas pump at Disneyland. Tokyo has a pump as well, but it seems shiny and new. There's a handbar for the front passengers in the ride vehicle. At Disneyland, it goes down, but at Tokyo it goes in an upward direction. You'll also notice each have a unique sticker and at a different location. At Disneyland, over the rear fender, there's a device that I believe is used to check that restraints are secured. At Tokyo, it appears that it is no longer over that fender, and instead is located over the front fender. At Disneyland, there's a sticker at this location that is missing at Tokyo. In the past, the vehicle bodies were more like the ones that Tokyo operates today. At Disneyland, the start of the attraction just leads into an additional chamber. At Tokyo, the chamber was hidden behind a wall and it had to be excavated. Tokyo does not have the mirrors, barrels, or ladder, and instead there's just another hole in the wall. The reason Disneyland has this mirror is because of a now defunct element of the attraction back in the day. You were able to use this mirror to see the group in front of you go into a different Hall of Promise than the one that your vehicle will. Disneyland has a fairly empty looking hallway that has 3 doors at the end. At Tokyo, there's water and multiple paths on the sides, and only 1 door ahead. At Disneyland, there are 3 possible scenarios at this point to go through, each with their own dialogue and special effects. If you want to know more about those chambers, I've made a video and I'll put the link in the description. Tokyo only has the 1 chamber. Along the sides, there are some trinkets at Tokyo that look like they are offerings. Tokyo also has a couple of stone sentries holding onto crystals. Something that's pretty neat about this chamber at Tokyo is how it's kind of a combination of the 3 that you find at Disneyland. There is the starry sky like in the Chamber of Destiny, the concaved room like the Chamber of Earthly Riches, and water being poured from a pitcher like in the chamber with the Fountain of Eternal Youth. Where Disneyland has its cobras, we find that Tokyo has more of its plumed serpents. At the end of the hall, there's a huge face of Mara, and then they start to chastise you about not being very good at following directions because you looked into their eyes. At Tokyo, we find the crystal skull atop of a podium that is made to look like that plumed serpent in a coil. Each attraction's respective deity decides to alter your course, and you get a brief glimpse of where you should have gone. At Disneyland, that path is briefly illuminated before it goes dark. Tokyo's path does not darken, and the light has an interesting effect to it. At Disneyland, there's some extra ceiling above you before you fully enter the next chamber. The ceiling is also not brick like it is at Tokyo. Even though the brick texture is different, the cutaways and impressions are very similar. I find this similarity quite fascinating. The piece that has a shape that's quite reminiscent of Texas has a greater cavity at Disneyland. The sections of the branching lightning at Disneyland stay illuminated longer, allowing you to see longer streaks. It is also white instead of a bluish green like at Tokyo. An intriguing difference with the lightning is how it emanates from the door at Disneyland before coming back. The strikes at Tokyo just go one way, and they're quite a bit thinner. They also seem to linger a little longer in place. Both attractions have a stone that is blocking Indy from view. At Disneyland, it's a neck of one of the Cobra columns, while at Tokyo, it's rather nondescript. Unique to Disneyland is the silhouette of Indy that is briefly projected. 3 of the slithering slate figures at Tokyo have damaged jaws. A bizarre feature that I believe is worth pointing out is how there seems to be an extra base of a Cobra archway. Only 2 of the Cobras have one that is broken off. 2 pieces can be found by the door that Indy is holding shut. And there's the one that we saw earlier. The broken column to the right of the door has a larger gap at Tokyo. The fog effects are more subtle at Disneyland as they stay a bit more horizontal to the ground, while at Tokyo they're quite vertical. Indy is using his shoulder to hold the door shut at Disneyland, while at Tokyo he's using his full back to keep it closed. Not too horribly long ago in the past, Indy also had his back to the wall at Disneyland. It also made a bit more sense because that darn rock wasn't there. The ajar doors that Indy is trying to jam shut have quite different depictions upon them. Disneyland depicts 6 cobras springing forth. Tokyo's appear to have 2 serpents with wild headdresses and an extra set of jaws, kinda like the alien from Alien. As you begin making your way towards the next chamber, you find yourself descending down some steps at Tokyo, while at Disneyland it's just a ramp. Here we can see that Tokyo has a swirling vortex that is absent from Disneyland. This central chamber has a fiery orange glow at Disneyland. Tokyo has more of a magical blue-green look. In the area with a horde of skeletons, we find a skull in the rockwork exclusively at Disneyland. Both attractions have what looks to be a king or a chief. They're located in different positions and they each have their own unique throne and headdress. Only the Disneyland one has a fan though. The skeleton that is falling out of their coffin at Disneyland has its mouth shut while at Tokyo it's wide open. In the bug scene, Tokyo's creepy crawlies are a little bit bigger and much more defined. Some of them even appear to be jumping at you. While the bugs at Tokyo are just kind of already present, at Disneyland most of them actually emanate from the cracks. At both attractions, when you approach the bridge, a beam of light is shot at you. At Disneyland, it hits the base of the bridge on the left side, while at Tokyo it hits the pillar just to the right of the bridge. The suspension ropes hang lower at Disneyland than they do at Tokyo. From the bridge at DisneySea, when looking at the base of the vortex, you can see that it seems to be powered by some form of glowing runes. This same area in Disneyland is mostly just a bunch of rubble. As we get to the big heads of the temple, Mara at Disneyland and the Guardian at Tokyo, we can spot numerous differences. While Mara has fire in one of their eyes, the Guardian has a mystical energy that somewhat mimics electricity. Where Mara has a smooth headdress with a cobra on it, the Guardian has what appears to be some kind of mask with a mosaic texture. This mosaic texturing is also underneath the nose. The Guardian has the whole navel cavity exposed, while Mara only has half. For the column supporting the suspension bridge, Disneyland has highly detailed sculpted cobras. At Tokyo, the serpent is just painted on the top area of the columns. At Disneyland, there's an extra bit of decoration that makes it look like you're entering the jaws of a snake. Next, we find ourselves in the room with the cobra and serpent. At Disneyland, there are 3 identical doors, each one with a cobra. I never noticed there were doors before, but you can actually see a handle and hinges. However, at Tokyo, there are 3 circular seals that seem to depict the serpent fighting a warrior. It also looks like the serpent has a rattle. The 3rd seal has actually been opened and we can see the scaled body of the serpent coming out. Though the cobra does not come out of his secret passage, you could actually see its tail. At Disneyland, Indy reminds us of his phobia of snakes.
Snakes? You guys are all wrong.
The same can't be said at Tokyo. The way their bodies are positioned are quite different, and the cobra at Disneyland is even smashed into the wall and back out. The cobra's mouth at Tokyo can fully close, and the fangs can extend once it's open. The serpent's jaws at Tokyo go from open to a little bit more open. Their tongue is a lot longer, and their eyes glow. Their audio is also completely different. Once you get inside the backside of Mara, you will see the phantasm of Mara appear right over your heads. Tokyo does not have an equivalent effect of this. At Tokyo, there's a podium with the crystal skull atop of it, flashing and making sinister noises. On the inside of the face at Tokyo, there are numerous candles, while there are none at Disneyland. But I guess when you got a giant flame, a candle doesn't really hold a candle. The lowest point of the chamber in Disneyland is covered in a bed of lava. This lava used to be covered by a sheet of fog, but in the most recent footage I've seen, this has not been the case. Tokyo's valley is still coated in fog, and this time there's arcing lightning leading up to the vortex. The support shoring for the bridge is different at each park. The simplest thing to point out is how Tokyo has 3 vertical planks. Disneyland only has 1 vertical plank. Though this metal rod at Disneyland doesn't seem very well hidden, in show lighting it's very easy to miss and has the added effect of making it look like the bridge is about to collapse. The windings on the rope for the base of the suspension bridge are quite different. Roughly 72 degrees at Disneyland and quite a bit steeper 40 degrees at Tokyo. After going beneath the bridge, each temple's respective deity tries to blast you off the face of the planet once again. Each one leads to a fog blast. However, at Tokyo, you get that fun electricity trailing away. There is also a rather intriguing difference that started right after the bug room that went on up to this point. At Disneyland, there's a musical soundtrack that can pretty much be heard throughout the entire attraction. However, during this particular section of the ride at Tokyo Disneyland, the musical soundtrack is completely voided and opts for a more eerie tone by just having creepy sound effects take its place.
Snakes.
Inside this dark corridor at Disneyland, the truck will eventually stall out, and you'll just wait in the darkness until it can start back up. At Tokyo, instead of stalling out, it'll come to a crawl as it sees a face in the wall. This figure will then yell and blast a fireball at you from its mouth. While the truck was stalled at Disneyland, you could hear the squeaking of rats. As you continue on your way, you find the source of those rats on a log that you smash through. This rat log effect is exclusive only to Disneyland. In the next area, we are confronted with mysterious figures on the wall, laser tag skeletons at Disneyland, and stone faces within the maw of some beast at Tokyo. Similar depictions of this can be seen earlier on the queue and the ride itself. Tokyo does not appear to have this doorway before the blowguns, nor the one at the end of the hall, which is somewhat cleverly disguised. Next up, we find ourselves rolling into the boulder scene. The rope that Indy is hanging from is much more frayed at Disneyland. Indy appears to have a rather larger whip at Disneyland. His satchel is also found more towards his back instead of side. The sleeve for the right arm seems to be a bit more rolled up at Tokyo. The boulder at Disneyland is rather pitted and, in a way, it kind of resembles the moon. Tokyo seems a bit smoother but with much more large cracks. The cave also has an overall smoother, less jagged look at Tokyo. There's also a larger amount of roots at Disneyland, but they don't have these cool looking tassel things that Tokyo does. At the end of the ride, we find Indy standing next to the debris caused by the boulder crashing through a wall. The pile of debris reveals that the wall was only held together with stone, while Tokyo had a more hybrid approach using stone as well as wood. This time around, it is Tokyo that is missing the fog effects. Into Boulder Scene, up to the end, there are more differences to be heard with the audio. At Disneyland, when you approach Indy, you hear some triumphant trumpeting. This moment at Tokyo, there's no music. The final climatic score is heard at both attractions, but they start playing it at different times, which tweaks the tone a little bit. At Tokyo, we hear those triumphant trumpets that played earlier at Disneyland, right before the score. The music ends at the perfect spot for Tokyo. Disneyland had to make up for this by adding its own additional score.
Next time, you're on your own.
After a job well done helping Indy and solving the mystery of the missing tourists, you have a long walk back. At Tokyo, you have the opportunity to purchase a on-ride photo, as well as the opportunity to take a picture of the on-ride photo. Hey, as usual, thanks for watching this video, and I'm really glad you made it this far. What do you think about the two different ways that the music was used between these attractions? Please let me know your thoughts in the comments, because I'm rather intrigued to hear what you have to say. Personally, I think I like the more eerie tone that Tokyo provided. Well, that's pretty much it from me. Thanks again for helping me pass 1,000 subscribers, and until next time.